It's really wonderful to be back in San Francisco. This is like being at home. And I am here surrounded by extraordinary friends, my daughter, my great friends, Pierre and Jim, and Ife and Gloria, Naeem Brown and Cheryl and Charles Ward, who have made it really possible in a lot of ways for me to be here, and old friends, and it's very powerful because there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home.
Look your heels, look your heels.
By old professors who guided me and set me on a path. Maura Roth is here, who's been a great, great, great influence in the history of women in arts, in this practice. I want to acknowledge her, and of course the amazing Ulysses Jenkins, who without him, my life would have taken on a very, very different path, because this brother came to my house and snatched me up out of my studio and said, you know something, there's a thing called graduate school that you need to know about. I said, what's graduate school? I just got out of school. I didn't go back to school. And I think had he not come to my rescue, a rescue that I didn't know that I needed, my life would have been very, very different, I think. So I'm grateful to you, Ulysses, and I say that as an artist to a great performance artist who led the way. So, to Miss Val. So I thought what we're going to do, I'm going to ask Valerie a few questions, and then Valerie's going to ask me a few questions. And you know, I've been doing like lots of interviews with artists over many years now, and I have many conversations that I have had with artists that are recorded and videotaped, and all kinds of ways that I've been preserving these conversations that I've had with artists, because I think that speaking to artists about who they are, what they're working on, and their cultural production is absolutely key. So this exhibition that Valerie has put together, as you can see, radical Black performance in contemporary art, or the radical presence of Black performance in contemporary art. I think the title alone is really an interesting one. And so I thought that maybe we might start with having Valerie talk to us a little bit about the exhibition itself and about how you came to approach the exhibition from this vantage point, located around the notion of Black cultural production and the notion of radicality.
Mm-hmm. See if I can do this without hurting ourselves. Thank you, Carrie Mae. This is lovely to share the table and activate this table space with you. Radical Presence came out of really an initial project that I did, which was the 50-year retrospective of Benjamin Patterson, who I don't know if he's in the room, but you'll...
in here?
He's somewhere around here.
There he is.
There he is on the stage. And it all started really at the beginning of my time at the Contemporary Art Museum in 2001. I was asked to coordinate the presentation of Yoko Ono's Yes exhibition at the Contemporary Arts Museum. And John Hendricks was one of the curators for the exhibition. I was working with him, and they had a photograph in the exhibition, which was piano activities, Philip Corner's piano activities. And there, in this midst of insanity, which was the piano activities, was the lone Black figure of Benjamin Patterson. And I said, who's the Black man in the photograph? Why is it that I've never seen or heard or understood anything about this individual? Having worked at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, for me it was paramount for those artists of color to see themselves reflected somewhere in the histories that were being presented to them within the pedagogy of what they were being taught. They never saw themselves reflected. So to know that this man existed and that I didn't know about him really started the seeds, which have later, over time, some decade later, has manifested as radical presence. It also has been an ongoing conversation with Clifford Owens, who's also featured in this exhibition, to find these histories, to bring these voices and these faces to the fore, to insert them back into the conversations that they've always been a part of. Yes. There's never been a moment in which the practices have not been front and center. They've always been in plain sight. Why within larger histories and in larger conversations they've not been a part of those conversations is a different thing altogether.
So then in part you're saying that this exhibition, I mean, I think that it's sort of extraordinary that an artist, or rather your not knowing an artist, becomes really the catalyst for the generation of a whole set of ideas and premises and notions and an exhibition and a book, that all of those things sort of grow out of this one particular trigger. And that in part then, this exhibition is about redressing some aspects of performance history as we know it. So talk just a little bit more about this idea, about your ideas, about your practices as curator, and what it is that you're really attempting to do then with this show as a sort of site of cultural production itself.
Exactly.
And a critical frame for cultural production.
Exactly. I mean, it has, I think, come to sort of define my practice as a curator, that I'm always looking for those histories that need to be brought to the fore and repositioning them, whether it is Black artists working in conceptual art practices, whether they are Black women artists working in film and video, whether it is Black artists working with light and sound. These are the practices that sit on the edge of the edge of the edge. And they're important. They're important to the overall conversation. They're important to the overall discussions about conceptual art practice, to know that these voices, and this is just one element. Yes. I mean, there are artists of color that all need to be brought to the table. But for me, my contribution, this is what I want to do. And that has sort of come to define my practice, even though I think it's much larger than that. But I'll accept that because I think it's very important. Right.
Yeah. I mean, you know, the thing that I'm always sort of thinking about is to the extent that brown people, women, are not discussed within the frames of modernism and the modernist practice, is to the extent that they are really absolutely left outside of it and marginalized by it. And so that unless you start a critical practice that really engages the complicated factors of the work within a larger scheme of art histories, then it's always sort of an outlier, right? There's this sort of great work, and then there are those people over there that need to be considered. And a part, your thing is to bring that into your critical as a central location.
Exactly, it is essential. And also to undermine this concept that Black art has to be some specific thing. Yes. That it has to say one specific thing. We're not monolithic as a people. And most of the projects that I do are intergenerational, to see how these conversations and what people address and choose to address is part and parcel of their time. And it starts to undermine this concept that this is what Black art looks like. This is all the things that Black people always talk about. We talk about many things all the time. And Blackness and how we understand Blackness throughout time also shifts. There are some things that are universal throughout everyone. It's not just about being Black. And then there are things that are very specific to this Black body. That's right. And then there's things that are very specific to this Black body in the 1950s, in the 1960s, in the 1970s, and so on and so forth.
Can you talk a bit about the artists that are in the show and your process as a curator in making the kinds of selections that you make? So you start with a kind of trigger with Benjamin, and then it moves out from there. How do you decide who to include in an exhibition, or for that matter, who not to include, which is what I was going to ask Okui about why I wasn't in the Venice Biennale this year. So wait a minute. So I asked him and then I said, oh no, you don't have to tell me. And he was just like,
You know, that's like kryptonite to a curator.
And of course, really, actually, I was really thrilled that I wasn't in the exhibition because it really gave me time to really think about it, and I actually had a chance to make a work around it, which was even more important to me. But I do think that it's interesting. I'm very interested in curatorial practice and how I make decisions about who to include or exclude from the kinds of practices that I'm engaged in.
Well, when I do the Venice Biennial, I'm going to have you.
I want to be closed.
That's a win. That's a win. Not an if. That's a win. I'll talk more about who I included rather than who I didn't include.
Yes.
Because I don't know everything. I know what I know. And I'm very fortunate to have artists who are extremely generous. Artists who, Senga and Marin, who will talk ad nauseum with me about their time in LA and the things that were important and the people who were there and the people I shouldn't forget. That's how I met Ulysses. Artists bring me to other artists, and that's a very important thing. Younger artists will tell me of their professors, the people who had an indelible imprint upon their practice. And so in some ways, that's in a way how I cull and how I determine things. It's what really helps to define a conversation, what helps to establish the parameters of a conversation. With this, I also wanted to give a sort of history about performance art in and of itself and the various manifestations that performance art sort of inhabits. You know, there's the guerrilla performance art, the art that happens on the street, the art that happens in the studio. There's the interactive art. There's the art that, you know, they're the residuals. They're the things, the props. So I wanted to give a full frame. So you're not just looking at Black artists working in performance, you're actually getting a conversation and a history about the manifestation of performance art in the white cube, you know, and how the various ways over time that those things have taken shape.
Well, one of the wonderful things about seeing this exhibition, you know, I actually, I really like going to shows more than once. And I'm learning, the older I get, the more I have to slow down. No, the more I'm slowing down. Right? And it takes me longer to see, but also it's really about learning to see, the process of learning to see. And that you can't see a serious exhibition walking through it once and spending an hour or two. You have to come back again and again and again. And one of the nice things about coming through, back and forth through this space over the last couple of days is really starting to what's working, how it's working, really actually having a sense of your own mind, of my being introduced to your mind play is really wonderful. This sort of echo of David Hammond in one space and Marion in the next space and Senga in that corner. I mean, these are really beautiful. These are beautiful echoes of one another. But, can you talk to me a little bit more about some of the, there's early work. What's the earliest work that's in the show?
1962, Ben Patterson, which you will all experience shortly.
And the newest work?
Well, the newest work, I would say it's either Jacoby or, I mean,
that's the video piece, that's the large video piece.
And in terms of age ranges too, with Ben, sorry Ben, being the oldest in the show, and with Jacoby also being the youngest. A lot of artists did create new work for the exhibition, so it's hard to say which is the early, you know, the most recent work. There's several works that were 2012, so.
You've been doing, you know, I've known Valerie now for actually a long time. We don't see each other very much, but we've known one another a long time. And there have been times when I've called Valerie because I'm working on various projects that I asked her to involve herself in something that I'm doing, and she says, sorry, sounds like a nice idea, but I've got something else that I'm working on. There's a level, there's a beautiful, you have a really wonderful level of consideration of you know, anything that you're really serious about takes a while. Takes a while to develop. As you said, for instance, in this case, that you saw Ben's work maybe 10 years ago, maybe more. It took 10 years really to pull this exhibition together, 7 or 8 years to pull the exhibition together. And then of course you needed to do the book and you needed to do the writing, that there's a whole thing, that there's a life that's involved, there's a lifetime that's involved in the organizing of an exhibition, that it takes an extraordinary amount of time. And that's one of the things that I've really grown to really respect about you as a curator and an art historian. The way in which you approach your practice, I think, is really quite considered and remarkable, because a lot of people work on a lot of shit and they don't do it very well. But the other show that I thought was really very important that you did, and I'm very interested in the way in which you collaborate with other curators. And so I wanted you to talk a little bit also about video cinematic remix, which was another extraordinary exhibition that was mounted, but actually it didn't travel.
No, it didn't travel. No.
Can you talk a little bit about that, your relationship with Andrea and Remix as a project?
Yes, it was Cinema Remixed and Reloaded Black Women Artists and the Moving Image.
Say that again.
1970.
Say that again. I don't think people heard that.
Cinema Remixed and Reloaded, Black Women Artists and the Moving Image since 1970. Had a little brain moment. Yes, so the project, again, it's looking at what is not present, which was a compendium or information about Black women working with the moving image for, again, the white cube, not for the black box. And Andrea Barnwell Brownlee and I started really thinking about who are these individuals. Not just, video installation, and very much like Radical, really looking at the history of the moving image in the white cube, in the white box. Installation-based, multi-paneled videos, the Super 8 works that were meant to be single-channel pieces played on box monitors, to full-on installations with elements of moving images within them. So it started with the Spelman College Museum of Fine Art, and was mounted there over 1 year, in the spring and in the fall, in 2 parts. And then it came to Houston as one full installation. There's a wonderful book that we also created with that exhibition, but a very important one, because we also took into consideration those women artists who were making experimental shorts. So we really wanted to include their work in that as well.
It was a brilliant exhibition. I mean, I learned so much from that exhibition, as I'm learning from this one as well. But, you know, I mean, one of the things that, you know, that I'm sort of, that I think about a lot is how do you know, while I'm like deeply concerned about what happens within African American cultural practice, where we're situated, how we are or are not sort of brought into the fray, how the work might be critiqued or not, or the narrowness of what those critiques generally are. I'm still much, you know, very, very interested in how to open up all those sort of spaces of habitation so that it's not so much based on color, skin, race, ethnicity. You know, how do we start to sort of, you know, on the one hand, absolutely knowing that this kind of work is critical and essential, but also essentialist. It's sort of like this sort of problem. You know, so I was walking down the street and I thought, okay, so the Mexican Museum is going to open, and then that museum is, the Asian Museum is going to open, then MOAC's going to open, and then the Museum of Modern Art is something else.
Right, exactly. Well, you know, when artists of color, it's true, when artists of color talk about their bodies, then it becomes about identity politics. But no one talks about the absence of those bodies as racist, inherently racist. So, yeah, I mean, that's the reality of it. So, I mean, I think You're right. This cannot be, this is but one aspect. This is but one strategy.
Yes.
There has to be multiple strategies employed to tell the fullness of the story. But you cannot, for me, I feel like you have to create the repository first.
Yes.
You know, and that way people can't say, I didn't know.
Yes.
I didn't know these artists existed. Well, there was an exhibition, there's publication, there are books about this.
Right.
So then you've not done your homework. And then why have you not done your homework? But again, there has to be multiple strategies. Black cannot always appear in the title of an exhibition. And it doesn't, and again, because you're right, what you run the risk of is essentializing something, reducing it down to a common denominator, which is why I think the intergenerational aspect becomes so key, because it undermines this concept of what you expect.
Right. Well, you know, I went to see portraits and other likenesses at Moad. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's smoking.
It's a wonderful show.
You know, so I hope you get a chance to see it. And I saw, you know, Micheline's exhibition.
Oh, powerful.
You know, and I just said, well, move over, Carrie, honey, move over. Because girlfriend is fierce.
Well, can we turn the tables and talk a little bit about your work? Yes. Because I have been a fan of yours for many years. And from the time that I know you've had, you cited Ulysses, and I know Dawood has also been a great supporter and a great usher, if you will, in many ways, and a great friend. But Carrie, I'm always just blown away. I'm blown away. I'm blown away by the kitchen table series, which we featured at the CAM. I want to say, a long time ago, Dana Fries Hansen, and I found that catalog, and I was just, I'm always, so let's talk about photography. Let's talk about your moving through photography and incorporating your body in photography, and again in the moving image as well, but where performance comes into play within that frame in your practice.
There's a wonderful friend of mine who's here, Beatrice. Beatrice, stand up 1 second so we can see you. Beatrice is a choreographer and dancer. I danced with Beatrice many years ago when I was maybe 18 or 19 or 20. And so we've known each other for many years. And so coming to, when I received my first camera, my boyfriend gave me my first camera. Like a really brilliant man who was also a real jerk. So we don't know where he is anymore. We don't know what happened to him. But he gave me my first camera, and I immediately actually began photographing myself. But I really didn't photograph myself because I was really interested in photographing myself at that moment. It was because I was trying to learn how to use my camera, and I didn't like asking anybody to do anything for me, and so it was sort of easy to do. And then, of course, I realized at a certain moment, which is what your work, your work teaches you a great deal if you're paying attention to it. If you're really paying attention to what you make, you're really learning about yourself through the process of making. And so it was really only a few years ago. It was only a few years ago. I'm like an old woman now. It was only a few years ago that I realized that I was actually involved in the act of performance, and that I've been involved in the act of performance for a very long time. And it comes out of this background, this interest that I've had in dance and in performance, that I've danced in the streets and I've photographed that, but I've never shown them. I sold hopes and dreams in a bottle in Harlem, and have really never shown them, with the exception really of this exhibition. So I've done a lot of these sort of actions and engagements that I've photographed because I really needed to know something about something through the feeling of my own self and through the feeling of my own skin, through the feeling of my own womanness. You know, what does it feel like to put yourself in that place, in that situation, in that, within those constraints? How do you work within certain kinds of constraints, and how do you do that with a certain kind of compassion and a certain kind of resolve? I think a young sister here, Tamika, did this piece this morning, right, about witnessing pain and enduring pain. I'm not really interested in pain on that sort of physical level, but psychically, I'm willing to let go some distance. So I've been doing this for a very, very long time.
Well, and the thoughtfulness, as you were talking about, the consideration of it, I mean, it started with these sort of very personal narratives. And I love what we talk about narrative. You actually use narrative. You actually use text a lot in the work. It goes from the micro, the personal, to the larger sort of histories, you know, from where I stood, I saw, which was such a brilliant series as well that kind of opens up those histories.
Oh, from here I saw what happened.
Yes,
and
I cried.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I think that there's something very important about, well, you said, I know what I know.
Right.
I know what I know, and then I know what I imagine that I know.
Right.
And there's that sort of wonderful space too. You know, I've always thought that it was important to implicate oneself, I, but as the omnipotent I, and the broader you, right. So that you're always in association, you're always in relationship, you're always relational to your viewer and to your audience. You are always acting as participant observer. You are never above it, you know, you are never outside of it, but you're always sort of in a dual relationship to it. And that, I think, creates a certain kind of tension and a certain kind of register that's really important for me as an artist to engage.
Well, I definitely want to get to Hopes and Dreams because that's what we featured in the exhibition. But the series that's really captured me in many ways is In Memoriam. That series, In Memoriam, that you've done, which is the restaging of these iconic moments, historical moments that are captured in photography.
Oh, constructing history.
Yes, the constructing history series. Oh my word.
That's a very interesting piece. You know, I made that piece because I was lying in bed. You know, many of my best ideas, I think a lot of women spend a lot of time in bed. You know, like I'm rarely there eating bonbons, but I'm always there taking a lot of notes and writing and spending a lot of reflective time. And I think it's very personal. It's not because I don't feel like getting up, but it's because there's this sort of sensory thing that's going on, that your body is demanding that you pay attention to something. And that it can't pay attention if I'm running up and down the street, that I have to stay there and I have to learn what this odor is. You know, I was listening to Cornel West yesterday and he said, you know, you come in through the world through shit and funk and stank. That's how you come into the world. You come in, you know, in this messy, gooey, bloody thing. And
which is home.
Which is home. And which is home. Right. And which is hope. And there's something about being close to that mess that I think is really important because it allows you to break through to some planes and platforms that are really essential. Like, you know, like I just don't think of myself really, you know, I'm always like completely floored when people say that they are moved by my work, or that I'm important to them, or that I've influenced them. I just don't think about myself in that way at all. All I know is that I'm just trying to every day get up and make the most important work that I can make that registers the depth of our humanness. And I just, that's the only place I want to be. You know, just how do you really do the work? And you do the work because you're willing to fight for it. and to suffer for it, and to forego dinner parties and relationships and birth, whatever, you know, because you need to get this work done. And I think that, like you, Valerie, we're very much the same. The work that I think that we have to do is so important. It's not important in the abstract. It's important in real terms. And so when I go to, or when I went to, for instance, the Venice Biennale, I walked in initially and I looked at Oqui's exhibition and I thought, oh no, my brother has failed on a major scale. And then I went back again, and I saw it differently. And every time I went back, I saw something else. I saw this extraordinary mind at work. And so we know that we are engaged social people. We are engaged in this pursuit because not only because we love beauty, but because we love peace, and we want to see social justice enacted in the world. And one of the ways in which we do that is by making the work that we make, by showing the work that we show, by sacrificing many, many things in order to make this known, to make these artists known, to have them considered in a major way. And so when I went to see Oqui's exhibition, it was finally within that context that I really began to understand the significance of what he made. That in this sort of moment of late capital, you know, that, you know, as we enter this sort of extraordinary time, that the chicken, as it were, has come home to roost. That the colonies have now been cracked open. And all of those people are rushing out of those colonies and they are marching into the new world and they're saying, we're here and we must be counted. And this is what it looks like, this is what it feels like, this is how it functions within the relationship of all those other things that have been made. We are here, and we are here to mark this territory as a new territory for the inclusion of ourselves and for a new kind of democracy that might be possible. So it's really sort of amazing. And when you start to understand that exhibition in the larger context, it is absolutely breathtaking.
Oh, yes.
Really quite amazing.
It's a lot to unpack. It's a lot to unpack. And Carrie, we were just in Florence, speaking about Venice. We were also in Florence for the Black Portraiture Conference. And it really, I think it was organized by NYU, Deborah Willis, and that astounding committee of brilliant minds, Skip Gates, Thelma Golden. It goes on and on. I can't name everyone on the committee, but to be there, to be in Florence, to be in that place. And I love Venice because I felt with Oqui's exhibition, the Moor has come back to Venice. and he had a lot to say over the years of it being expelled. But there was a lot to say, and there was a lot to unpack there. Yes. I mean, we are still trying to define our black bodies in a way, in that larger. I mean, we were looking historically, and I think what really became the impetus for that conference was all of those amazing architectural and decorative figurines that were of these black figures.
The Blackmore figure.
The Blackmore figure. Yes. Throughout, I mean, it's just part of the decorative arts of
Florence.
Of Florence and of Venice. And they were everywhere.
Yes.
And they were beautiful, but clearly in subservient roles, clearly there to light the paths, to serve, to be in servitude. And we were there to unpack that. In 2015, unpacking something like that, it lets you know that these issues still resonate. When we look at what's happening even in the United States today with black bodies, young black men being seen as threatening enough to individuals who are there to service and protect them that they are instantly killed.
Like the piece last night. Say that.
And where's Sean Leonardo?
Sean, he's here. No. Okay.
He brought it. Okay, so if you didn't, for those of you who were not here last night, you need to be here tonight. Eulogy is powerful. And I think that's what has made this exhibition really resonate, because we're still unpacking what it means, what these black bodies mean.
And I think also there's this sort of amazing shift that's going on too. There's an incredible shift that's taking place. You know, one of the things that I've been asking people about while I've been here, and we talked to, Rena's about this the other night. I was looking at, like I'm in San Francisco. San Francisco, the whole city is changing. It's changing this really profound way. And, it occurred to me that, there were all of these sort of like, incredibly, irresponsible anti-socialists who were developing social media. It was just like, wait a minute, right? I mean, isn't it insane? Like they're these like computer, they don't even go outside, and yet they're like, completely changing the sort of landscape of the city. And so there are all of these sort of things that I'm sort of very interested in. I'm sure that many of you are as well out here. How do we use, and everybody's sort of talking about this, how do we use these sort of extraordinary platforms of social media in order to engage?
And people don't talk to one another.
And people don't talk to one another.
I've never, Houston is not a pedestrian culture, but I have to say I am blown away by just the sheer number of homeless and mental illness. People here who are homeless on the street due to mental illness, and where we have failed as a society of shielding and caring for people. And I know it's old hat for people who live here, no disrespect, because it's hard to see that every day. I think at some point you do develop some sort of orb around yourself that you don't see it. But for someone coming into it, it is jarring.
But but on the other hand, this afternoon I saw the most elegant homeless man I have ever seen in my life. So my brother had like his jacket on, he was sort of like draped around his shoulders, and he was sort of smoking a cigarette like this, he was sort of like, it's sort of like the way, James Baldwin smoked cigarettes. I mean, I followed him. I thought, wait. Here's a man with a story.
Yes.
But there are some, powerful shifts that are going on. And so what I want to ask you about, and I think then we'll wrap up. There maybe we'll take one or two questions. But what are you working on now? What are you doing?
Okay, we'll ask each other what we're doing. I am working on a survey of Ginny Jones, which opens in December. Very ecstatic about that, and so that's what I'm working on right now.
Tell us a little bit about Ginny Jones.
Ginny Jones is a young artist who came out of painting, who was really moved by the sonic histories, particularly African American artists with the modern jazz quartet and free jazz, and the sort of I just finished the essay, and I think I'm still unpacking what it is I wrote, but it's basically the absence of black bodies in modernist history, except for the influences.
Yes, oh yes.
Because, the music is always a major influence, except we're not there, and we're not a part of the conversation. So we did a wonderful exhibition. Bill Arning is here, my director, my illustrious director. We did a wonderful exhibition, Bill, myself, and Dean Dodurko, called Outside the Lines. And part of my contribution to that was Black in the Abstracts Part 1 and Part 2. And wanting to bring to fore all of those black artists who were working in minimalism, like Bill Rath-Hines and Alma Thomas and great Sam Gilliam. And so there are all of these, again, hiding in plain sight. And Ginny, the evidence of things unseen, Stanley Whitney. And so Ginny is really the extension of that conversation, but in her own right. So we're bringing her paintings.
Is it going to travel?
It will not travel, sadly, unless
Well, but you
never
have
say
the
never.
but you have the catalog.
We will have the catalog.
So
for
we'll get a
sure.
chance to see it
We'll
at
get
least
a
in that
chance
way.
to see that, yes. And
Great.
you, my dear, what are we working on?
Let's see. Faith. What am I doing? What are we doing now? I think, let's see. So I'm trying to finish up a film. I've been working on a film for a while, and I think that maybe it might be done in about a year. It's called Swinging into 60. And so that's kind of fun. And, you know, it's actually very complex. You know, and then, so I'm working on that. And then I just finished this, I've been doing lots of interviews with artists. And I did a project, Maren was there last year, was it? Last year at
the Guggenheim.
At the Guggenheim.
Oh, congratulations on
that.
that major survey.
Thank you.
And the generosity of bringing all of these artists together in conversation. It was a full 2 days of events.
It was
It
3
was a full
days, and it
weekend
was
of events.
fabulous. This
and I
started
couldn't
like
come
on
because I
Thursday.
was doing the Trenton Doyle Hancock.
Child, you,
but I
you
would have
missed
been
it.
there.
That's
I
what
would have
say.
been there.
You
I missed it.
Missed it.
Yeah.
It was just wasn't it just wonderful? I mean, it was just really sort of amazing, and I love doing those kinds of projects. So not only do I work on my own work, but bringing other artists together for in substantial and meaningful ways is a practice that I've been engaged in one form or another for a very long time. I work with kids through my organization called the Institute of Sound and Style. I'm doing actually a new fellowship at the Ford Foundation this year, which I'm very excited about. You know, they said, well, you only have to come for 2 days. And I thought, but if I only come for 2 days, then I'm really not using the Ford Foundation for all that it's worth.
So you'll be there for the year?
I'm going to be there for, you know, it's actually, they were very generous. They gave me this sort of fellowship. I'm the first artist, and it's for the year, but I'm only expected to be there twice, like once for this and once for that. But I thought, no. I'm going to have like 70 artists come and join me, you know, at the Ford Foundation, because I thought that why not? If you have this amazing platform, you might as well use it, you know, and have like interesting conversation. So those are the kinds of things that I'm doing. So that's it.
The iconic Carrie Mae Weems. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that. Excellent. All right. So should we take a few questions?
I don't know. Should we take questions? Yes. Someone said yes. So just a few. Yes. Marguerite.
One of the things that I hear in all of this, I think is extremely important to people of color, is to understand that we have a history
Yes.
in this world,
Yes.
this continent, that we are part of the development, a very
Yes.
important part of the development
Yes.
of the culture that is the United States of America. And I think that that's been ignored. And I hear you guys digging it up, pulling it, you know, working it for all it's worth. And I think that's extremely important. It's extremely important to our youth. It's extremely important to our ability to continue to exist as a cultural force. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, we could. Oh, let's just move it around. Those with the hands up.
Yeah. People can just make comments
Yeah.
Keep them short.
This is Samela Lewis, the writer of Black Artists on Art, is republishing Volume 1 and Volume 2
Awesome.
through Oakstop. And right now you see a lot of reactionary responses to Black artists being moved out of Black spaces, including Black art spaces, including as curators and owners of galleries. And I was wondering if your curation or your work responds to that, or is a response to that, or if that's just kind of this reactionary response.
No, not. I mean, Samela Lewis is incredibly important. Yes, I will, hats off to her for sure. In terms of being reactionary, I try to be a little less reactionary, a little more proactive and more thoughtful. But again, many voices need to be brought to the fore, many strategies of how we discuss and deal with things.
Carrie Mae Weems, are you publishing these interviews that you are doing? Do you have a plan to publish them?
Well, actually, I'm developing radio podcasts. Yes, I'm developing radio podcasts. So I'm very, very excited. I have lots of them. The program that we did at the Guggenheim last year, which included many visual artists, but also performing artists and musicians and composers and dancers, etc. It was really quite a beautiful event. Some of those materials are going to also be on the podcast. So I'm trying to decide on my name. I'm not sure if it's Flow Radio. Carrie Mae Weems bringing you Flow Radio. We'll see. We're trying to come up with a name for it, but we're going to develop these things, and hopefully we'll have them out in the next couple of months. I'm really working hard on it, so they'll be someplace out there in space.
How will we know? How are you going to know?
I think that I'm not sure. We'll talk to some of these social media guru guys. If there's one thing they know how to hook it up. So they may not know their social, but they know how to hook it up. Maura, how are you? How are you?
Thank you, Maura.
I have a couple of questions. I'm a retired newspaper journalist. I'm not a visual artist. I do storytelling, I sing, I do a lot of stuff, but I don't do visual art, but I love it. And I lived in Oakland for 25 years. I've also worked in San Francisco. I'm just wondering, since I don't get to go around the country and see a lot of other Black artists' work, so I don't get a sense of the themes that are going on, I'd really like to know if Black artists are doing a lot of work around Black Lives Matter. In Oakland is like ground central for a lot of protests going on every day, every week. And it's in your face, it's in my heart. It's very difficult right now for me. When I'm around white folks in a certain setting, this is stuff I carry with me. It's painful to turn on the news and see people, a young Black woman in a yellow bikini
being beat to the ground.
Yeah. 15-year-old, not a woman, 15-year-old teenager.
Girl, really.
Yeah.
Thrown down. It's real. I don't think that white people can appreciate how much rage and pain that those of us that haven't tuned out are walking around with. And if I was a visual artist, I would love to be able to depict that. But instead, I watch the news and I have my other outlets. There
are things happening. There are things happening. Absolutely, there are things that are happening, and I think. I'll just say that there are absolutely things happening. I'm thinking right now about. Much of my work is about this issue, before and after. Do you know what I mean? In one way or another, because we're really addressing sort of, the issues of our humanity and how it is trampled upon constantly. That's a part of the work. That's a part of the effort. But there are some very dynamic artists that are really looking at this issue and making work around this issue. And one of the major pieces actually at the Venice Biennale is essential to this idea, and it is called, Black Lives Matter. So it's happening, and it's happening in many different ways and around a myriad of forms, I think.
Is there going to be any way that we can see that work for those of us who can't, get to these places?
Well, I think, there is, Google it. No. I'm not trying to saying that in a funny way. Yeah. I'm always looking at, I'm not every place either.
Right.
But I am curious about what's happening, what it looks like, and who's making what. And so I make my own effort to find out about what it is and what it looks like. And I just surf. I surf just like everybody else, trying to find some of the materials that matter to me. Because ultimately, with all of it, whether it's news, you have to go deep. Because none of it is coming to you via CBS, right? So you really have to go deep, and you have to do, it is not being televised. So are there any more questions? I think we should probably go have cocktails.